strolling home along the riverbank, and I thought today I'll do it in a few parts. I'll tell you the story building up to becoming an Elvis Presley fan. Now, as I once spoke about 1980, it was around 1980, but it could have been 81 that I actually became the fan. But anyway, this is the build up. I got this job as a trainee chef de partie at a 3-star hotel. I'll not tell you the name of the hotel. It had 50 odd bedrooms, I think, at that particular time. A la carte restaurant, did functions and all that, good sized function room and things like that, and other small rooms. So it was a big concern. Anyway, I got my little room, which was like on the second floor, and it was a staff quarters at the time, and it was right at the end of the corridor, and it was a small little room. Anyway, I got settled in there, and I decided to have a day out in Lincoln. I'll go and get my hair cut and get something to eat and have a wander round. So I got in my little white Mini. I had a little Mini at the time, and off I went. It was when you could drive into a little city and park up, no problem at all. You used to know your way around, because I knew Lincoln pretty well. So you could just drive and find your little parking spaces. Not like today. I mean, that's another story. You cannot find anywhere to park, or it's very expensive and things like that, but that's another story. Anyway, I got my hair cut. Then I decided to go and get something to eat. And after I'd done all that, I thought, oh, I'll have a little wander around Lincoln Market, little market area. So I was wandering around the little market area where all the pets were, budgerigars and things like that. Anyway, as I was walking past, I was looking at these little budgies. One was a Busby colour. Was it greeny yellow, that sort of colour? Anyway, as I was like looking at this little budgie, it was like down near your sort of feet level, just off the ground. Anyway, these youths came past and kicked the cage, and I was going to take up after them, and they ran off laughing, and this little like budgie dropped off the perch onto the floor, and I thought, God, I wonder if they've killed this bird, or certainly shook it up. Anyway, I decided to go and see the guy who was selling them and purchased this bird, put it in a little box for me, took it back to my car and drove it home to start with, because my mum had an old budgie cage left at home. So I took it home. Anyway, I went, got it all sorted out, fed and all that, and they were fine. I called him Busby. And anyway, I went to see the hotel manager and asked him if I was allowed to bring Busby to the hotel, to where I live, my living quarters, and they said no problem at all at that time. So Busby ended up coming with me to the hotel, and I used to, believe it or not, I used to leave the window. I was only young at the time, so you didn't really think. I used to leave the window open in the room, ajar, sort of thing. Busby, well, he did fly out, what I found out later on. And anyway, I used to leave it open, and I used to leave his cage door open so he could fly around the room back into his cage. Anyway, he never flew out the window. If he did, apparently I've heard a chambermaid saw him fly out and fly back in. Saw him literally fly out the room and come back in. He never left. Anyway, this particular night, I put his it's time to settle down. I put his cloth over his cage, and fell asleep like you do. And anyway, it was early hours in the morning, really early hours, and I heard this. I've never heard a noise like it. Never ever have I heard a noise like it. This really loud sound, you know, like a budgie, how they are when they're frightened, but loud, really loud. I thought, my God, what's going on here? Now, half asleep. Anyway, something must have said, Wayne, get up. So I got out of bed, and I couldn't find him. Put the light on, I couldn't find him. And I thought, where's he gone? I know I left the window open, but It would not have gone like that through the window. Anyway, it was behind the wardrobe. I looked behind this wardrobe, there was a gap behind the wardrobe and I could just get my hand in this gap. And as I sort of pulled him out, his heart, you could feel his body was just pounding. Anyway, I put him back in his cage. This time I shut the door up at this particular time because obviously he'd be frightened, and put the cloth over. And I went back to sleep. I literally fell back to sleep. Anyway, all of a sudden I couldn't move. I was frozen in bed. I really couldn't move. It was like, I don't know, I've never felt anything like this in all my life. Literally couldn't move. And I was like fighting to get up. Anyway, as I eventually got up, half dazed, sort of dazed, I peered across the room. It was only a small room at the door, and there was a person stood there, quite a small figure stood at the door, and physical sort of figure. Anyway, eventually I got up because I was still dirty, and then there was nothing there. I looked out down the corridor, there was nothing. Anyway, the next morning I decided, I told the staff, the manager and all that lot, and that same night of what I saw, this lady apparently booked in and saw exactly had the same experience and booked out, but she booked out early hours in the morning of the hotel. And anyway, is it the mediums? The mediums come round, they come round a bit later on, and they said to me what I saw. I can't remember what they called the figure. They were going back in the centuries, and what I saw was sort of true. And apparently they said, whatever you do, don't tell the staff what's living in, because you might frighten them and they'll not come and work there. So to this day I kept it to myself. And this is a really, really true story. And anyway, I'm going to finish it off on another day. And this is the build up to when I became an Elvis Presley fan. But this is just part one. It might be done in a few parts. But that was an absolute true story. So once again, thank you for listening.